Okay, so this morning we are with the phenomenal, the formidable Jo Hilditch. Why do I admire this woman so much? She's a serial entrepreneur, but actually she's an accidental entrepreneur. She comes from a long line of farmers. She sells most of the blackcurrants that she makes, I believe, to Ribena, or that goes into Ribena. And then by accident, she invented this, and she's happy to, I think, tell the story this morning of British Cassis. Oh my goodness, people, yes. Unfortunately, this is a sign. I don't know how we get on promoting alcohol on Worcestershire libraries. Never mind. This is one of the products that Jo has innovated and is a stunning success. So she's got White Heron, the farms, she's got White Heron, the drinks, she's got White Heron properties, beautiful places to let. But she also went on to Dragon's Den. She didn't just go on to Dragon's Den, she got 3 offers and she walked away from them all. So I want to delve a little bit deeper into that this morning. How do you walk away from that? Anyway, so you think, that's blooming impressive, isn't it? I mean, just enough with that. That's enough to impress. No. Last Saturday, she was in Worcester Cathedral being made the High Sheriff of all of Herefordshire. Hereford Cathedral being made the... I wasn't there, okay? I can't be... Anyway, the point I'm making is she's just an all-round package. And as if this weren't enough, she's a lovely person as well. She's not full of herself. And anyway, she's just a great person to know, to love, whatever. So this is the Jo that puts the Jo into mojo. That's what I like about our Jo. And let's hope she's going to do the same for you this morning. She's going to share with us her books. Be prepared. They're not the normal canon of business books. They are quite different because, as she says, every book I read changes my thinking. Be wary of your thoughts. Your thoughts turn into actions, your actions into habits, your habits into character, and character determines your destiny. So she's going to share a little bit of that with us today, and she's got some quotes as well. Pretty's on the controls. As she's mentioned previously, any questions or any comments, please just pop them in the chat and she'll curate those at the end. We won't be on tape for that bit, so that's where Jo will be off the record and happy perhaps to open up a little bit more, but also hold on to the end because she's going to give us an offer on this lovely substance. How marvellous is that? So it's well worth staying on for the code. So let's get on with it. Let's learn a lot, see where the conversation takes us, which should be relevant, whether you're a newbie or an established business. Let's get some insights, what's challenged her, how she's overcome them. We'll take it from there. Morning, Jo.
Morning, Anne. You're making me blush. You really are.
Good.
I'm not
Good.
that good.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. Your pants. Okay. So now we've got that out of the way. So this serial entrepreneur, you are such a serious entrepreneur. Let's first of all delve into your first book. Which book do you want to start us off with?
Well, just as a precursor to all my books, I'd just like to say that I'm not a business book reader. I'm really not. I read voraciously. I read all the time. And I think, as you were saying before, every book tells a story. And those stories, for me, are mostly fiction. But in every book, you find something that is a message and something that you can use. And the first book was that kind of reminds me of my dad and my childhood, and I've thought about a lot over the years in terms of its allegorical content, is The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I just love the fact that you can go through something and get into a surprise. So you go, when I was that little 11, 12-year-old, I used to go and get into my mother's cupboard where she had a mink coat and think that I was going to walk out the back. Well, I never did, and I never did find that mystical Narnia. But I've thought about, as Glenn talked about last time, the kind of sliding door moments where you move into a different territory and you find something extraordinary.
Oh, my goodness. We're cutting to the chase quickly here, Jo. Which ones, can you actually define those moments? I mean, first of all, what age were you when you read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe?
My dad read it to me sitting next to my bed when I was about 11. And then I think I read it again later when I was about 15. I don't know, back then I can't think of moments, but I guess later that there was the moment when I decided not to go to university, and that opened up a whole new world. And there was the moment. as you were saying, when my brother sadly died, that's why I'm an accidental entrepreneur to a certain extent. And that opened up a whole new territory of marvelous things that gave me opportunity.
So let's go into that, Jo. So at 17 or 18, when you were in sixth form, you were taught to speed read, and you say that was one of the best courses you've ever been on.
Yeah, actually, no, I was a bit younger than that, but it means that I really can read very, very fast. So I can read and comprehend, and it was a brilliant thing to do because it meant that I could spend more time reading what I wanted to read and less time reading all those boring biological books and chemistry tomes that I really didn't enjoy too much.
So why didn't you go to university? What was your decision making there?
I think I was very young when I did my A-levels, and my friend Nikki, who's on this call as well, she and I were just a bit naughty, and we just wanted to get out in the world. I wanted to get to London and find a boyfriend. I'm not sure if she wanted to do the same thing too. She probably did.
These enfants terribles saying, "Come on, let's go out there and rip London up."
We just wanted to get out there, and I think we saw that there were so many opportunities, and actually I do regret not going to university now, and I think Nikki does too. I think there was an awful lot I could have learned, and I did have perhaps quite a lot of wasted time in my 20s when I was messing about quite a lot. And I was always entrepreneurial. I was always starting up little businesses, cooking or dressmaking or importing linen from Thailand. And then I got a job in PR. So, it wasn't a wasted decade at all. It was fantastic. And I did have a great time in London, and I did find a boyfriend, which was lucky. Yeah, it definitely was a sliding door moment. But it was a Narnia landscape. And there was Aslan the lion. I can't quite remember who that was at that point.
Sure but there was that character in your life.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to your next book. What's your next book?
So my next book, so I love books that have powerful women in them. And I think that reading Far from the Madding Crowd, aged about 16, 15 probably, I think that Bathsheba is the most fantastic woman. I mean, this book was written 150 years ago, but she's the kind of woman who would ride through a forest and lie flat on her back under the trees. She was vain, but she was so spirited, brave. And I guess now, I read it again last year, now coming back to it, of course, the farming thing, there she was, she inherited a farm, which she did on her own. She always said that she didn't really want to marry. She didn't see, although she went on to have 3 husbands, obviously, but she didn't really see that she had to marry. I mean, she was a woman beyond her time, and she was a primary feminist. So I think that goes along with my spirit, probably. And I love the book, and I reread a lot of the Hardys the year before last. I love them, but this one's really good.
Is there a female role model that you've kept in your mind's eye as you've progressed through your career? Would it be Bathsheba or whatever name? Was it
Bathsheba?
Bathsheba, yes.
Bathsheba.
Yeah.
I think there are so many. I mean, I've just read, I know we discussed this yesterday, Angela, but I've just read Michelle Obama's book. I don't really read autobiographies very much, but, powerful. There are so many great women around. I mean, there are great men as well, don't get me wrong. But I guess that I grew up in an environment, and I've been in an environment which was very male orientated. Many other environments are not, but my farming environment is very, very male orientated. So Bathsheba can always hang in the back of my mind. But there are some great other female role models, and men. And
what do you say to women that focus on their femininity in that way and say, I find it hard to hold my own against men? What would be your advice? Not advice, but how have you ever felt that?
Yes. Do you know what? I was talking to somebody last week, and we were talking about how women tend to have imposter syndrome more than men. And I don't know why that should be. We shouldn't feel like imposters in any way, but we do. And I think it's an innate, I think it's an innate feeling in ourselves that actually I don't think our children have, but I think in my generation, so 50s, we do have it. And I think, so keeping those strong women in your mind, I think you can always walk into a room and feel good about yourself.
I think that the key thing there was from International Women's Day, Mel Larson was on that panel, And she said, women have a tendency to make themselves small, and we should make ourselves larger, and not just obviously physically, but to make our presence felt. And I think what I love about that Michelle Obama book is how much she took on the First Lady role. Is that what you admired about it?
Yeah,
about
definitely.
her in that book.
Yeah, and she keeps an independent life, and I think that's the thing and that's the same as Bathsheba and Far From the Madding Crowd is, keep your independence, and I mean, actually now when I go to a room of farmers, I don't see any of us as being any different. We're all just people. So, when you can get to that stage and walk into a room, I think, that's when you should feel the best about yourself.
Oh, I love that. I love that you're saying that. A South African man I adore says, I wish people would stop talking about men and women and black versus white or able versus disabled. Can we just see people as people, please?
Yeah.
And I always, that diversity piece, which, by the way, people, at the end of May, we're interviewing Nicola Whiting, CBE. Oh, I get her title mixed up. Ignore that last bit. She's not that bothered about the she was bothered about meeting the Queen, but she said something very important, and that is the diversity. And as you say, that sort of imposter syndrome that you're on about there, Jo, that's very important, isn't it? To say, well, there's a strength in that.
I'm going to be interviewing. I'm starting a podcast. I'm going to be interviewing Kate Bingham, and one of the things that I asked her in some preamble questions was, what do you worry about most when you're in a room of these super bright people? And she said, I just have terrible imposter syndrome. And
even Kate, sorry, Jo, explain to everybody who Kate Bingham is.
Kate Bingham was the chair of the vaccine task force, and she was the one who was responsible for getting us all 40% of us vaccinated so early and so well. Really bright woman.
Yeah. On to our next book, Jo. Can you believe it's already, time is ticking on?
Oh, Lordy. So my next one is a book by an American philosopher called Ayn Rand, and it's a book called The Fountainhead. And it's got, behind it all is the philosophy. Her philosophy was objectivism. So the two main protagonists in the book, one is Howard Rourke and the other is Peter Keating. And Howard Rourke is, some might call him an egotist, but actually he just channeled himself into doing what he could and kind of getting himself out in the world, not at the expense of others, but to do the things that he wanted to do with his own creativity and not being bent by others. And then Peter Keating is this man who is, you might call him vain, but he's always affected by what other people think about him, and he doesn't have so it's the power of the individual against collectivism. And it's a great story, and it's got, you don't really love any of the characters, but there's a great court scene in the last 100 pages, which I've read quite a few times. I just find it very, very powerful, and there are lots of quotes from there that I could come back to later. But
are you going to share one now? The Fountainhead. Do you want to share?
It's quite a long one, but it's quite a good. It's quite.
You're not going to read a page and a half, are you?
Yeah, it's all of this.
Go on. Who's up for it? Yeah, go on, Jo.
Okay, so this is really about individualism against collectivism. So throughout the centuries, there were men who took first steps down new roads, armed with nothing but their own vision. Their goals differed, but they had this in common: that the step was first, the road new, the vision unborrowed, and the response they received, hatred. The great creators, the thinkers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors, stood alone against the men of their time. Every great new thought was opposed. Every great new invention was denounced. The first motor was considered foolish. The airplane considered impossible. The power loom was considered vicious. Anesthesia was considered sinful. But the men of unborrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid. But they won. And that's the kind of intrinsic thing about this individualism and creativity. So yeah, love that book. Read it. I've read it. I read it every decade. So I'll be coming up to reading it again in about 5 years' time.
Oh, that's a well-worn copy. And Pretty's looked up all your recommendations, and she'll be able to share at the end of them, which are available on BorrowBox as well, weren't you? Not just hard copies. Okay, Jo, on to our next one, please.
So the next one was a book that actually Glenn had as well. And funnily enough, when I've been looking at the list of these, it slightly differs to the previous one. So the Fountainhead is about individualism and forging forth yourself and maybe being a bit selfish in the way that you forge ahead. And this one is The Go-Giver, which I really enjoyed. So it's the only business, I've only got 2 business books here, but it's one of the 2. And it's a fable around a young professional who's kind of struggling in his life, and he meets a mentor who takes him through 5 really good lessons about how you should run your business. And it's about being authentic and valuing, giving more value of yourself to other people. It's about your influence if you place other people's interests first. So it's about altruism, really. So, you will best run your business if you manage to be altruistic about others and think about others before you think about your own.
And can I say, we are seeing a living embodiment of this and also Jordan and Doug are on from BNI, and one of the philosophies there is give as gain. The more you put in, the more you get out. I rang up the Hive and said, do you do like a business book club? I can see you've got a load of business books. And, no, but we'd like one. Would you like to set it up? It's like, oh, for goodness sake. I don't need anything else to do, but there we go. And I've thoroughly enjoyed, oh my word, I've got so much out of these Saturday mornings. And it's led to work with the British Library, and lots of other doors have opened as a result. And it's just born on Anita Kiss originally saying, well, we'd like to set one up, I'll help, sort of thing, but would you? And so, yes, absolutely. The Go-Giver, you'd recommend that highly, would you, Jo?
I would. It's
next one then.
It's a nice fable, and you come out feeling like, yeah, I can do that too.
Wonderful. Right then, on to our next, please. Should I call you High Sheriff or something?
Do you have a? You must bow and scrape and call me High Sheriff. Everyone else does. I've even got a sword.
I feel we need to see this.
So my next book is another allegorical tale. It's The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and it's just a lovely tale. I mean, I think people might read it all in different ways. I mean, the way I read it is, you set out on your life in search of a treasure. It's the story of a poor Andalusian shepherd who gets prophesied, or he dreams about he's going to find treasure at the base of the pyramids. So he sets out on this travel across the world, and eventually he gets to the pyramids, having met an alchemist along the way, and having been given advice, and having lost his money and made his money and worked with this alchemist. And he eventually gets to the pyramids, where he discovers that actually the place where the treasure is buried is at home, where he started from. So it's about the circularity of life to me. It's about kind of setting off on your journey, and you'll make a whole lot of decisions along your way. And, in the end, you can only come back to yourself, and you can only come back to being true to yourself. And it's just a nicely told tale. It's very short, and it's very sweet and lovely. And it says on the back, it's a transforming novel about the essential wisdom of listening to our hearts. And that's definitely how I find it.
Jo, can you share with us where you've listened to your heart? Your Chris Evans calls it gut over nut, and obviously it's not the I like it though, gut over nut. Can you share with us any decisions that you couldn't say perhaps at the time, no, we need to do that, and it was quite a key decision, going back to those sliding doors moments, a key decision that, no, we need to go in that direction. I can't articulate perhaps why we need to do that now, but it's that direction we need to head in.
I mean, I think recently, a very small decision, but I decided to take all my cassis sales via a distributor. And I wanted to keep it in-house because it felt so much nicer to really be in touch with the consumers rather than to be distributed. But actually, it's been such a great decision. It's freed me up to do the things that I know I do best, which is run the whole business and not get involved in minutiae, because I'm more of a kind of parity person. I like to look at things, and I always like a project. So I kind of slightly dash from one thing to the next, but that was definitely a really good decision.
And do you just want to tell the story of British Cassis, how it came into being?
Yeah, why not? So we grow blackcurrants for Ribena, and one year we had about 100 extra tons. Now, 100 tons is 4 Arctic loads. That's a hell of a lot of blackcurrants that you have to take off the bush because you don't want to leave them on the bush over winter. So we did pick them onto the floor, and it just made me feel completely ill because it was, all this fruit that could have ended up somewhere and just ended up on the floor. So in that year, I thought, well, what can I do? And I'd been to France when I was a teenager and spent a lot of time drinking Kir Royales, and which is blackcurrant, is creme de cassis in Champagne. And I thought, well, we can do that and we can do it better. And I've always found it rather sweet and sickly. So that year I thought, well, I'll try and use some of this fruit. And I ended up using half a ton. And that made, I don't know, 10,000, but no, not that many, probably about 8,000 bottles. So you can see I have a long way to go to get to that 100 tons. But that's where we started from. And then we started in farmers markets and selling to local delis and so on. And now we are listed in Waitrose, and we were looking to get big into the on-trade this year, having just been listed across Mitchells and Butlers and a whole lot of on-trade. But of course, that all went down the Swanee. But Waitrose has been great, and we're our own brand, Fortnum and Mason. So we've had a brilliant year with them because they've been doing hundreds of hampers, which has been great for us. So yeah.
And what I love about it is it's not too sweet. Did you do that deliberately?
Deliberately, because I find the French one is really cloying, and I can see Steve Jackson nodding his head. Yeah. And we've won 3 stars. In fact, we've been in the top 39 products of 12,500 in the Great Taste Awards. So that's quite a good accolade.
Come on, then.
We started a framboise now as well. But I think the thing is now that drinks and food is all about local and heritage and provenance and British and all of those good things, which, we could say we were a bit lucky to get on the bandwagon at that time, but actually it's been very conscious. So it's been a good decision.
You've been doing this for some years, haven't you? How many years?
Well, it's been in that bottle, in the new branded bottle, for about 3 years. But we've been growing it we've been producing it for about 10 years.
And how many years have you grown blackcurrants?
About 100. But I'm not that old.
No. Book, please, Jo. Next book, please, Jo.
Oh, next book. So another fictional book. So William Boyd is one of my favourite authors, and I think Any Human Heart tells this wonderful tale of a man who you become to completely believe in. He goes through the whole 20th century basically, and he meets people along the way, and stories are told that are with real people. So as you read it, you think, God, this is a real man. And it's a journey through his life, and it references the theme of the changing self. So as you grow up and grow old and grow different, you do change, and you can change. And I think somebody once said, leopard never changes its spots or whatever, but actually you can, and people do, and it depends what environment you're in. You don't want to be a chameleon, but I think you've got to see when you're wrong, and you've got to be able to move with your age as well. My children would say, Mum, I don't think you ought to wear that anymore.
Do they? Do they dress you?
No.
I'd love that. I'd love a child that said, "Oh, Mum, you'd look better in that way."
Yeah.
Oh, Hannah. What would you say about balancing motherhood with business?
I think it is difficult. I think certainly when the kids were young, I think, we come, it's another thing like imposter syndrome. We come with a bit of guilt because we're never quite doing enough for them. And I did try to always be there at important times. And I did try to make sure that, luckily I had my own business. So it was up to me to be able to balance the stresses of motherhood with the stresses of running a business. And I think now they would look back and look up and say, you've been a great role model. from my own point of view, I think I regret that I probably missed some of the things that I should have been doing and the kind of closer responsibility I should have taken for them.
So what would you say to modern mums? Make sure you're there for X, Y, Z. What would be the key moments?
Always be there for birthdays and parties and speech days and sports days, and just I think you have to try and take time out to be able to do those things. But it's difficult if you're employed. It's very difficult to balance because you've obviously got a holiday. I'm very lucky that I could go when I wanted to. But I do still think that being a strong role model as a mother is as important if you're in the home or if you're out of the home.
But have you seen a difference since when you started work to where we are now with regards to how things have changed for mums?
Yeah, I think looking at our kids' generation, so they're in their 20s. There's no question that they will go out and do stuff, and they will find a career path that is going to suit them. Whereas I think when we were in our 20s, there always was a thought that you might not, and it wasn't a kind of prerequisite to your life. But now I just think that there's no other way that kids would think about it. I think it's much more balanced now.
Good that your children, they don't think that differently, whether they're a male or female.
I really don't think they do.
Yeah, it's a tribute to your upbringing, their upbringing by you, though, I would say as well. On to our next book, please, Jo.
What is my next book? This is one I read. This is another business book. It's just one I read the other day, and I thought it was quite good. The 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive. He's written a few books apparently, but I haven't read many of them or any other of them.
So what? Yeah. So why did this one reach you?
I don't know. It was a leadership fable, and I think these ones that are leadership fables to me work better. So it's about a leader's crucial role in building a healthy organization. So in here, there are 2 businesses, and the one business doesn't realize why the other business is being so successful. And it's put down to these 4 things, which are building and maintaining a very successful, a cohesive leadership team, creating organizational clarity, which sometimes I think in the past I've been guilty of not doing. So it's made me look at that a little bit more sharply. And then over communicating what that is. I think we quite often talk to our teams and we expect them to just know what we've told them once, not going to tell you again. But actually, I think if you keep communicating messages, and that was something that came out in here, then you're going to have a better business behind. And then just reinforcing the organizational structure through human systems. So it's good read. And actually, I think I probably will read another 1 or 2 of his, because I like the way he keeps it very clear. And I like
yeah. And Steve Jackson's on, and as part of Vistage, he ran a session yesterday where Paul Barrett from Carndine, a previous guest, he was saying, my takeout from that is to learn to lead, you've got to have, I think, was it Steve, trust, creativity, wisdom, heart, something like that, I believe.
Heart. I like heart.
Why do you like that, Jo?
Yeah, heart is good.
Yes, and in our conversation that Friday night over, might have had one of these. Anyway, and we were talking about flexibility, the importance of flexibility with your team, that how you rock and roll all together. Do you want to just describe perhaps your philosophy in that way?
Well, in the environment in which we work, we have to be flexible, because sometimes the tasks on the farm are very time driven. So I'm talking the farm here. So that means that, they might well have to go out on a Sunday afternoon because you've got a glorious, lovely spring day and it's dry and you've got to go and do the job. But goodness me, on Wednesday afternoon, when you've got your sports day for your child, off you go. Or, so we have the luxury of being able to work like that and wanting to work like that. And in fact, I just offered a job to a part-time assistant on the cassis. And I said to her, you come in and do the job whenever you want, whenever suits you, because she's got horses. So she wants to go off and event at weekends. And I said, well, if you want to work from 6 till 12 every day, then if that suits you, that's fine by us.
Mm-hmm.
I think as long as you've got an environment, and we've all seen over the last year how we can be more flexible. We really can. We started by saying, no, the contract says 9 till 5, in you come. You'll only have a meeting at 10 o'clock or whatever it is, and we'll have the management meeting on a Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon? No, that's really dull. Why don't we on Friday afternoon? Why don't we Friday morning, come in a bit early and let's all piss off home early.
Yes.
So we can be flexible. We know we can be flexible. And not that I propose that we stay on the Zoom forum forever, because I find it really frustrating and difficult. I think we've got to get back into meetings, but my goodness, it does save a lot of time sometimes, particularly on one-to-one meetings.
Especially where you are in deepest, darkest Herefordshire. I mean, to get into Birmingham is how long?
Yeah, I can easily drive an hour and a half to a meeting, and so, that can be 4 hours out of a day.
But before we go on to your next book, Jo, what are you missing about face-to-face meetings?
Oh, I just love being with people. I love looking them in the eye properly. I love seeing the way they move, which reflects their mood. I don't think you just don't get that human feeling.
No,
the heart feeling.
Yes, this is it, and it's so much of our emotional power is wrapped up in that, isn't it?
Exactly.
Okay, Jo, number 9, I believe we're on.
8 or 9. Okay, this is a book that I would never have picked up. My cousin had told me to get it. I don't know if anyone's read it. It's called Factfulness.
Never heard of it before. You mentioned it the other day.
It's 10 reasons we're wrong about the world and why things are better than you think. And it basically explores the misconceptions about the world being a really depressing place. The world being about poverty, about war, about all the horrible, awful things we read about. Sorry, pandemics. In fact, when I was reading it, the chapter I was on was was saying, there are 5 really difficult things that we're confronted by, and I just happened to be reading it, and the pandemic. The pandemic paragraph, but yeah. So it's, he says, this Hans Rosling, who's a Swede, he says that actually right now there's no better time to be alive because everything is really improving, and he has he walks us through 10 instincts that distorts how we see the global picture, and he teaches you to look at them in a much more positive sense. So without going into all the details about it, it's light-hearted, but it's data rich. Loads of information in there about how the world is working and how we shouldn't generalize. I don't know. You need to read it too.
Yeah. I think the one about poverty is the one that gave me the most optimism, because I can remember being at Sunday school as a junior and raising money for Zaire or whatever it was in my little box. I took it very seriously. And now a lot of Africa is out of poverty, isn't it? Or
yes. This, there's a list of questions at the beginning. There's a kind of questionnaire that you fill in, or you fill in for yourself, which are all things that you might think. For example, how many people in the world have some access to electricity? 20%, 50%, or 80%?
80, is it?
Well, it is. But, when I thought it in, really, could it be 80? And it just, teaches you that the world is a better place. And, there's still a lot to be done for sure. And we see some terrible things going on. But it's, I'm a very much a glass half full person, and it is a glass half full book.
Brilliant. Yes, I like that. That's a book for optimists.
Yeah, gives you some hope. Well, if it actually, maybe it's a book for pessimists, because it makes you feel better.
Yes, and particularly at this time, fancy you reading that pandemic paragraph at the same time that COVID's just kicking off.
And it was just when I just watched the news about some stuff going on in China, and there were these people, totalitarian state, pulling people out and saying you can't go back to your house and putting things out, and it was literally taking off. And we were in denial, we didn't realize quite what was going on. And then lo and behold, 2 weeks later, there we are, a year ago, going into lockdown.
And I feel as though I need to read that book now to find out what the other 4 are. Don't go there. Let's keep it positive. We're trying to put a spring in people's steps. How many more books have we got to go?
Sustainability in there, and the environmental agenda, which those are the 2 things that really resonated.
And Bill Gates has told us all about the threat of the environment, hasn't he, versus the pandemic.
This is one of Bill Gates's favourite books.
Oh, you and Bill, hey.
Yeah.
And Warren playing bridge. I know. Okay, so how many more books have we got to go, Jo?
No, that's it. I mean, I read all the time, so there's lots of other books. I mean, one of the other business books that I read and I probably would have liked to talk about was Tipping Point.
Because
I just really enjoy, I keep saying to my team with Cassis, I keep saying, we're at the tipping point, But they're lovely stories about, for example, what are the shoes called? What are those shoes called? The big heavy shoes. Come on, who's read
Doc Martens?
Doc Martens. And it was about the tipping point for that, and how suddenly, where they'd been very, very down at heel and nobody saw them as anything, and suddenly they get trendy in Brooklyn, and it that was the tipping point that the whole thing came from.
And they've just paid all their monies back to the government, the UK government, haven't they? All the subsidies that they got for furlough and whatever, they've just paid them back, which leads me on, actually, that segues very nicely to a question, because I've got, sorry people, one of the privileges of this is I get my questions in first, is, given that you're from a long line of nobility, I know you haven't got Lady Hilditch, have you got Lady Hilditch? You're not Lady Hilditch, are you? No, I won't be surprised, people. Anyway, moving on. But given that you're from, 100 years, you've been growing those blackcurrants, and now you're the High Sheriff, and you're not the first in your family to do that. It goes back through the line. Do you feel business is noble or can be noble, Jo? Is it a noble pursuit?
Yes, of course it is. Of course it is, because it's all about, one of my themes as High Sheriff is going to be about the business economy. And, business is the living, breathing soul of all of us. And without business, then, we're a bit buggered, aren't we? But it's not about super greed. And I think, that was one of the themes that comes out in the Fountainhead, is that money is okay as long as it's perfectly moral to be rich. But as soon as it turns into kind of arrogance and vanity, that's when it becomes damaging. Of course, business in itself is great. And one of my things this year was being High Sheriff is I really want to connect businesses with charities in Herefordshire. So I think we've been isolated, and there's a big disconnect between the business world and the charity world, but they can both offer each other a lot. I think people in business can find opportunities with charities and vice versa. And it doesn't mean giving money. It just means kind of getting involved.
And that segues beautifully into Dragon's Den. How many years ago was it you went into the Dragon's Den?
It's about 5 years ago.
Tell us all about that. What was it like?
Well, it was really sweaty because it was so hot in the studio.
Not how I expected you to answer.
Well, it was sweaty as well, metaphorically too. But I don't know if I watched it again the other day, and frankly, it's absolutely awful. I hate watching it. I say some very stupid things. I talk about my accountant says so, and that really annoys me, because I'm more independent than my accountant. I should be able to make my own decisions, and I did make my own decisions. But no,
yes, you did. You got 3 offers and you turned them all down. And I want to examine your self-esteem, how rock solid it is, or I don't know. What was it about your self-reliance that said, I don't need you?
I think in the end, the reason I went on, it all happens very quickly, Dragon's Den. You have someone rings you up one day, says, do you want to promote yourself? I say, no, I don't want to be in an advert. And then they say, well, actually, this is Dragon's Den. We'd like to interview you, see if you'd be a suitable candidate. And I say, okay. And then before you know it, you're in a studio in London where they do a quick film, and they say, oh, yeah, you'll be great. Go away, write a business plan. Tell us what you're going to do, what money you want. Come back. And, oh, by the way, we're filming next Friday. So before you know it, you're there, and you're kind of slightly, your vanity is a little bit appealed to. And so I was in the studio after, I think it was about 2 weeks after the first contact. And I saw it as a publicity opportunity, because I knew that if people watched it, they would buy the product. And they did, we sold, I think the first time it was aired, I think we sold about £30,000 worth in the next 2 weeks. And
Wow,
it
was that powerful.
It's powerful if you think about advertising. And I had 15 minutes of primetime TV. What's not to like about that? But you just don't want to be made a fool of. And I don't know, that's why I don't really like watching it back. In fact, if Deborah Meaden was on Graham Norton last night, and I think she's good. And if she had if she'd said the right things, and don't forget, I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me. But they're on it for the TV as well. So,
what impresses you about Deborah Meaden?
I like her. She's a strong woman. I think she's made some bad business decisions, but she's made some very good ones too. And she's had some good investments. She knew a bit about the drinks trade. I think she's a no-nonsense person. And, there's no doubt that she would have opened quite a few doors.
And which of the other dragons impressed you? And was there anybody that got you back up?
Well, Peter Jones is very charismatic and very good looking. So I very much liked him, but he kept wanting to buy the farm, which was never on offer. He was impressive, and Sarah Willingham. Actually, Sarah Willingham, I have been into. She's got this thing called the London Cocktail Club, and so she would have been a good partner as well. In fact, her offer was probably the best offer. And I've been in touch with a bit, and she's really friendly and always replies when I send her an email. And I'm at the Good Food Show or something, she'll always kind of pop on the stand and say hi. These people are just people like you and me. They're not, they're no different.
You weren't intimidated by them when you walked in?
No, I don't think so.
You had the nerves. The butterflies were going.
Yeah, of course so. Of course I was apprehensive. But something I think it was my dad said to me, you don't need to be scared of people, don't need to be scared of situations, and just think, every single person sits on the loo.
I always use that. Yes, as in we're all normal, aren't we?
Yeah,
and I appreciate. Go on, Jo.
No, it's a leveler. I think it's a leveler. So we're all the same. We're all the same.
Yes.
We all have fears. We all have our insecurities. And overcoming them is what we're all trying to do all the time.
But I think you've just given us a little window in there, and that you talk about going into Dragon's Den, where I could use far more colourful language to describe how I would feel going into that room. You said, yes, I was apprehensive. You minimise it. You've been training your brain to think, actually, no, I'm not going to be bricking it. I am going to go in there. I've prepared for this. I'm going to give it my best shot. And you did in the time frame that you had. And also, I admire you for getting 3 offers and saying, no, actually, I can see that much as it's tempting to get your expertise on board, there's no value in any of those offers for me. So I'm walking away.